Are you a civil engineering professional looking to become a manager and a leader? Well, you've come to the right place. In this episode, we're happy to be able to share with you an ASCE panel discussion that I participated in with other working civil engineers focused on providing tips, strategies, and concepts that you can use to become an effective civil engineering leader. If you apply some of these strategies, you can really ramp up your success as a civil engineer and also hopefully mentor and guide other civil engineers to do the same. I hope you enjoy our panel discussion.
It is my pleasure to welcome our panelists. First off, Anthony Bassano, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure. Thank you, Terza. Thank you to ASCE for having me today. I'm a longtime member. I'm a civil engineer by background. I'm a licensed professional engineer. I started my career working for a consulting firm, and it was obvious to me that if I wanted to become a leader in the firm, I needed to have a lot more than my technical skills. So I worked really hard on building my project management skills, my ability to lead people. And when my company kind of saw some of the skill sets I had, they asked me if I would do some internal coaching and training for the rest of the firm. And my immediate answer was no. I'm a civil engineer. I'm not a trainer or instructor of any kind, but I ultimately convinced myself to do it. I love doing it. We had a lot of success with it. So about 13 or so years ago, I left my kind of consulting career and I started what is today the Engineering Management Institute. And we do a lot of learning and development programs, but also we do a lot of content, free content for engineers like the Civil Engineering Podcast, which we featured a lot of ASCE presidents on. So basically, I just kind of tell people I try to help civil engineers become better managers and leaders at this point. That's what I do now today. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. Carla, I'll turn to you next. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Carla Norris. Thanks for having me. Glad to share some information with folks about becoming managers. I work for a pretty big firm, AECOM. You might have heard of it. We're pretty big. We're about 50,000 staff right now. Doesn't feel that way on a day-to-day, but I've been with them for a long time, probably almost all of my career. Started out in consulting right out of school, but a different firm and just kind of ended up here, worked my way here. I do focus on transit and rail projects, and I've also ended up sucked into the world of design build, which any of you that are involved in alternative delivery, you know how kind of all-consuming that can be. But it's been a great way to grow my leadership skills and management skills. And ASCE involvement has been good along the way as well. Just making connections, networking. I've been involved since college. I was in our student group and continued that on. Outside of that, I've been the president of our local branch at this location and others. So good to stay involved and happy to still be here and still part of the community.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Carla. We look forward to hearing your perspective from the big engineering firms. And then Reuben, I'll turn to you next from kind of some of a smaller firm perspective.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you. My name's Reuben Zylastra. I do work for a smaller firm. We have about 20 employees, but I'm a structural engineer by education and by what I do every day. But I started my career in construction, working for Kiewit Construction on the West Coast on some very large bridge projects. And we'll get into later how, that experience, was transformative in terms of learning how to manage people and be involved in things that require interaction every day, every hour. So I did that for about 5 years. And then I joined FoothillsBridge Company, which is a small consulting firm here in Colorado. And we support contractors that are building bridges, dismantling bridges, retrofitting bridges. And we do the temporary engineering that's required to perform those tasks. So we work about 99% for bridge contractors across the country. My involvement with ASCE continues. I'm heavily involved in the Construction Institute, part of that. And there's a small committee called the Temporary Works Committee that I'm very passionate about. I chair that committee, and I've been part of that for about 10 years. So we'll talk more about that in terms of, just networking and using those tools to help improve and find examples of management. So I think that's it for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think volunteer, leadership opportunities are a great way to bridge from design to leadership and kind of use that on your resume to show leadership skills through volunteering. So hopefully, Reuben, you can expand more on that as we move forward.
Yeah.
So let me go ahead and start off with our kickoff question. So how did you prepare yourself for the transition from design to leadership? What were some of the resources, mentors, or even training programs that helped you along the way? Anthony, can I start off with you?
Sure. So I started as a civil engineer working in the land development space in the New York City suburbs. And, I really like doing the design work, I think like all engineers. And then one day they say, hey, good job. Now you're going to be a project manager or a manager. And you're kind of like a deer in the headlights. What does that mean? What do I do next? But I really think like based on my career as a civil engineer and then helping, working with firms and civil engineers after, I think there's like three main things to think about as a design engineer: your technical background, of course, then your ability to manage projects, right? Scoping, scheduling, budgeting, and then your ability to lead people. And they're all different, but they're all really critical, I think, to be a successful leader in the civil engineering world. And I think sometimes the project management and people leadership kind of just get lumped together, right? Like, hey, you could be a project manager now. But what I find is like getting into that leadership space, the real common denominator that you have to really be focused on is your ability to interact with people effectively. I think that's the whole key when it comes to going from design to leadership, because you will interact with a lot of people internally. You will interact with a lot of stakeholders on your projects, and those could be, sure, your client, but also like the public and like citizens that are, coming to meetings for projects, and a board that you're trying to get an approval from. So I think really if there was kind of a couple things I would say that were critical for me is one, I think developing your ability to speak in public is really important. I tell people that all the time. Even if you never get up in front of a room, it's just helpful for your confidence. It's helpful for your interaction with people. So I think public speaking can be good. There are some different courses like a Toastmasters out there that for me was very helpful. And I think just any way you can engage with people is a good thing, right? Like Teresa said before, if you can get on an ASC committee, that's really beneficial. You're interacting with different people. You're working on projects with people. So those would kind of be my key takeaways. Is I would say don't get project management and kind of people leadership confused, because they're definitely two different things. They definitely intertwine, but you need to work on all those different skill sets. And I think if there was like one skill that I would focus on in my career as an engineer, become a better public speaker, because I think that will also just help you with your confidence, whether or not you really need to speak in public ever. So those are my thoughts.
That's awesome. That's really good insight as far as like breaking those out and thinking about them as like completely separate skill sets. So that's really interesting, Anthony. Carla, can I turn to you next? Tell us about your journey and kind of what's helped you be a leader?
Yeah, so mine was very similar, and I'm sure Reuben here in a minute will say the same. You kind of just, one day it sort of happens, not out of nowhere. It usually is expected. I joined AECOM, I think it was just after I'd gotten my PE or just as I was getting it initially. Came on board, was, helping them out with a project that was coming off the shelf, going to bid, reviewing the plans, getting familiar with it, and the team manager transferred to another office, and it was like, all right, you're up. So, sometimes it's to fill a void. Sometimes it's intentional. Sometimes the organization is a little more thoughtful and says, we need more managers. We have enough staff. AECOM is famous for reorganizing. We joke that the name stands for almost everything changes on Monday. So that happens for a lot of us where they said, well, there's a role here, or there's people who need managed or projects that need managed. So it did just sort of happen. But, to Anthony's point about leadership being more than just your work, I see leadership as so much earlier than my career as a, working person, 9-to-5 corporate girl, and so much farther outside of just my job. I jokingly tell a story about how when I was 8 years old, I cold called every horseback riding stable in my zip code from the phone book to see if I could get horseback riding lessons. So there's certainly, if you or a cheeky kid in your life who's just, pretty bold and likes to go up to people and say, hey, this is my name. Who are you? Use that, harness that. Maybe it's a little annoying when they're a kid, but it can certainly serve you well, and kind of being bold and getting out there and not being afraid of kind of being, bringing people together. I've certainly had lots of really good managers that I think of often. Being a woman in an industry that's still fairly male dominated, although I did graduate with a 50-50 class, gender split. Sometimes it's hard to be what you can't see, as they say. So I've I've never really met one single manager who's like the core inspiration for how I act as a manager. But I can certainly say that all the managers, the good managers that I've had, and some of the bad ones, I've, kind of cobbled together, examples of how they would react to a situation or a person, to kind of build my own vision of who I not should be, but want to be as a manager. And so that's been really great for me so far. Working out well.
That's awesome. That's really cool to have that type of like insight to look at, good and bad managers and try to shape yourself based on that. That's really...
Yeah, and how you don't want to be. I'm sure we've all met somebody who you're like, man, this is not pleasant and I do not want to be that guy, or girl.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. That's, good to hear that that's something that you're thinking about as you're managing people. Reuben, what about yourself? Tell us about your journey, like mentors, resources, what's helped shape you along the way.
Yeah. I mean, something that Carla just said, I resonated with that, sometimes it's just inherent in people. Like you end up seeking out those leadership opportunities, and there are people that are meant to be leaders and managers and those that are not. And I think it's important to identify that early because industry and your boss is always going to want you to move on to the next step and to be a leader and a manager, because that's just how companies grow and whatever else. But it's okay to say, I need a little more training. I need a little more time. For me, I kind of stumbled into this out of necessity. We're working for a small company. There was only 2 other people to kind of manage work and manage projects. I quickly realized if I wanted to move things along with my clients and with my projects, I had to do it myself. I couldn't, if I had to wait for someone else to look over my shoulder or answer a question, it just slowed me down and made my job a lot less interesting. So, now at a company of 20 people, I wear the hat of, engineer of record, project manager, partner, all these different things. And I kind of just had to take those on. And early in my career, I would say, I was in my 30s trying to kind of navigate what this looked like in a small company. I had to reach out outside of our walls to find mentors and just ask questions. And to be trained by the School of Hard Knocks, there was a lot of trial and error. There was a lot of failure. There was a lot of weird calls to people to say, what do you do in this situation? And so I think that's taught me just to be, a lot more just okay. I'm not that you're rolling the dice as an engineer, but you're just trying things, and you can easily just approach people and just call and ask questions. And now here I am in my late 40s, and I feel like I make probably 30 calls a year to people, say, how do you guys handle this? And I know that I'll get a great answer. People aren't trying to hold all the trade secrets together. So it's been great to do that. But unfortunately, because I think it would be helpful to be able to say that any of the 3 of us followed a certain path. It's not prescriptive. I think you have to do it on your own. And that's something that I was always passionate about. So yeah, that was my transition to leadership.
Awesome. That's great to hear. So there's 2 great questions in the chat too. I'll start off this one that all 3 of you have a very different perspective on this answer. So I'm interested to hear how all 3 of you answer it, given your involvement with ASCE. How have the transferable skills you learned through your previous ASC leadership roles helped you in your current day job /work? So, Carla, I know you mentioned you were involved at a local level with sections and branches in Colorado. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So my very first leadership role in ASCE was in college. I think I want to even say it might have been my freshman year. They happened to not have a vice president, or maybe my sophomore year. So I very early on, there was a void, and I came in to fill it. And it helps from all sorts of aspects. I mean, Anthony mentioned earlier about, the project management side of things. A lot of that is just staying organized for other people and keeping everybody, headed forward towards a common goal, whether that's literally just writing a meeting agenda, running the meeting, taking notes. I mean, these seem like, kind of simple administrative tasks that maybe aren't very important, but if there's nobody to do that, people can't stay on track. You got to document things, you got to make a plan, you got to execute the plan. And, that's something we're always working to improve, right? But that really, even just starting on it in college, gave me this first chance of like, okay, here's the school year. Here's these, events we want to do or meetings we want to hold, initiatives we want to take. When do those happen? Work backwards. How do you start? Where do you, who's going to do the work? Who's going to execute? And then also on to professional branches. I actually didn't, now that I'm thinking about it, I took a bit of a break from ASCE leadership for maybe, I want to say 6 years into my career. And when I moved to Colorado, I joined the Southern Colorado branch here. Started out as secretary, which, I run the newsletter, the website, then became vice president, then past president. So many years doing that as well. I've also been on leadership in WTS. I'm on my alumni board for my college. I've always been a bit of a busy girl, but ASCE, even not even using Robert's rules of, the very formality of it, but just having that position, having that role, and having to work within a structure towards a common goal, like that is leadership, that is management, and it's very transferable, like I said, in work, in life, anywhere you want to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. And even just to be clear, leadership position in ASC, great, as someone that's part of ASC, right? We all want to promote that. But any organization that you're involved in, I know Danny asked this question. Danny's very involved with SWE, and there's many other groups that you can get involved in and have leadership positions. Toastmasters is another one. I think any of those are super helpful. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an ASC leadership position, but any leadership position, I think, like you said, Carla, is awesome. Anthony, I think you have kind of a different experience because you've definitely been not so much correct me if I'm wrong, have you been involved in leadership positions with sections and branches?
I was involved at various levels. I think where I could speak to a little bit on this question is I've probably visited about 40 ASCE younger member groups in person across the country.
Oh, wow.
From Florida to Los Angeles to Maine through Alaska. And I've done a lot of talks for them. And I always try to talk about transferable skills, right? Because you want to build those skills and then take them with you through your career because they can really help you be flexible and, seize different opportunities. And, it kind of goes back to what I talked a little bit about earlier is, I think the people skills are so important because regardless of, civil engineering, you can get into a million different disciplines, honestly. And this probably keeps growing more and more with technology and the different things that civil engineers can do in the infrastructure world. But again, you're always going to deal with people, whether it's contractors or the public or politicians or whoever. And I think the ability to navigate all those different relationships and conversations are really important. And that's a skill that's very transferable and you'll really use on any project. You'll use in any company you work on, whether you're working for a contractor, you're working for a design firm. So I really think those relationship building skills, those people skills are just going to be the most transferable skills because it doesn't matter what equations you're using or what types of projects you're working on, it's going to come into play. And so I really think that those are skills that you can build, and getting involved in ASCE is going to build those skills, and then you're going to be able to use those same skills on your projects. And that's just, for me, that's the bottom line, really.
Absolutely. And Anthony, I was just going to say, not discounting any of your AC involvement, because I know you've been super involved in content creation and really being a more leader, at least from public speaking and being involved in podcasts and everything else. So that's kind of a whole nother perspective. But Reuben, tell us about committees and your involvement in technical committees and how you feel like that's helped you with your transferable skills.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I'm the chair of the Temporary Works Committee, which has an email list of about 80 folks, but I think we have regular attendees between 25 and 30. And it's been interesting because it's kind of like running a small company. You do have to, you're recruiting to try and get members. You're trying to set goals for the committee to figure out what do you want to try and accomplish. A bunch of volunteers are probably more difficult to motivate than paid staff. So, to set realistic goals and to set realistic expectations and to learn how to poke and prod and keep things moving along is a challenging thing. And it definitely transfers to running a company and or running a project and doing all those things. And I think both Anthony and Carla said, trying to to navigate. It's almost, you hear about Congress people talking behind the scenes to try and get something through, like, hey, I need to go into someone's office and convince them that this is important. And that's kind of what it looks like and feels like, is you have to navigate that and motivate people and convince them to be on your side. So that's definitely been fantastic. And it's networking on steroids, because all of a sudden, these are people that you are interacting with on a regular basis, and they want to use you as a resource, and you want to use them. So it's kind of like, hey, we're in this together. And it's great because there's so many other small businesses in this committee. And anytime we get together, we just chat about what are the challenges we're facing right now. And there's just, it's just great camaraderie to have with that, to learn what others are struggling with and what their successes are. I just can't say enough about what that does for advancing, my leadership, my exposure to what everyone else is facing. So I think, I don't know if there's any follow-up question there, but that's where I come from.
I love the term networking on steroids. Anthony, go ahead. You were going to say something.
I was just going to kind of add one thing and to kind of reinforce maybe what everybody said. And I'm a big proponent of the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. I don't want to get going on it because I'll talk about it for hours, but it basically says that like 80% of the success in your career comes from 20% of your efforts, right? And to me, it goes back to a couple of the skills that we've been talking about here, like, your relationship building, your people skills, so if you can only build a certain number of skills, like those are the ones that are probably going to, outside of your technical skills, of course, are going to really generate the most success for you, because you could get pulled in a lot of different directions today. So I really think that, kind of keeping that in mind, that 20% of your efforts are going to drive 80% of your success. It's just thinking about like, where am I, what are those 20% for me? And I think that can be a big help for you.
If you Google the 80-20 rule and Anthony's name, there's a few different videos that come up as well. If you want to do that.
Oh, no.
If anyone wants to follow up on.
Just don't share with my kids. They'll make fun of me.
No. So there's a couple other questions in the chat. Again, if you have any questions, please put them on the chat. So how do you express your projected career timeline to upper management in an amicable manner? I'm going to look. Anyone? Carla, I know you work for a big firm. How have you communicated like where you want to go within your career to your managers?
Yeah. So we obviously, there's kind of the regimented, annual review process for us. And hopefully, if you work at a firm with a manager, you have something set up for that too. That's a really good opportunity to do that. But it's definitely, that's a once a year thing. And as a manager, I don't manage directly a lot of staff, but when I have managed them directly, the way I like to treat them is to touch base with them way more often than once a year. And so hopefully over those touch points, those little one-on-ones, even if it's just checking in every couple of weeks and saying, hey, how are things going? Are you overwhelmed in your personal or professional life? How's your work going? Do you feel, capable and confident and comfortable? Are you being challenged? Is it too easy? Is there anything I should do or stop doing to make your life easier? And that's how I like to be treated as an employee too. I have one-on-ones with my manager, I think maybe every other week, maybe once a month. Just bring that up. Literally just say it. I know it can be scary sometimes. It can depend on the manager too. Sometimes it might feel like you don't know what that looks like. You don't know what that role, if that role exists, if that opening exists. I will say that's probably been my biggest challenge, and kind of having those conversations is like, what does that actually look like? What am I doing today? How does my 40 hours a week look today? What is my 40 hours a week going to look like, or however many hours you work? What's my work day going to look like in this, management role, or whatever I want next to my career? What is that going to look like? How is it going to change? And you may not have the answers to all that. And it's okay to not have the answers, or for your manager to have the answers either. But the best part is just start small and say, this is what I've been thinking about. I don't know really how it's going to play out, if there's a position for me or what that will look like, but this is something I'm curious about. And fortunately, you can lead in a lot of ways. If you want to manage stuff, if you want to lead stuff, you can start with leading a certain discipline. You can start with leading one staff member, or managing one project, or a couple of staff members, and just kind of do whatever little bit at a time, take it slow, bite off just enough to chew. It should be a little challenging for you, but not so much that you feel, overwhelmed and like you're set up to fail. And talk about that. Talk about what you need to succeed, basically. Hopefully you have a really good manager, but if you don't, as Reuben suggested, call other folks up, get mentors from other companies. I have mentors at other companies, not that I am short of people to talk to at AECOM about advice, but I love asking around and saying, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think about this? How do you think I should go about that? What does that look like? And just let that evolve over time. Obviously, if you're doing these things and saying these things and nothing's happening, you might have to go a different route, maybe go around your manager or go to a parallel manager. All organizations have an organizational structure. I always see that as like a little bit of a jungle gym. Obviously, there's protocol. You want to go through your manager and they go through their manager, et cetera. But use that company, those people to your advantage. If one manager isn't really getting or isn't really understanding where you want to go talk to somebody else. It doesn't have to be out of, malice or circumventing them or anything, but, your company wants you to succeed. They want you to stay there. They don't want to hire somebody to replace you. So it's in their best interest, in theory anyways, to keep you moving on your career path that you want to go on.
That's a great answer. Reuben, what about you? How would you advise, I guess, at least your staff as far as making sure their career timeline progresses?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's a question we ask. So when we go through that annual review process, we ask people like, what are your interests and what do you think the next step is? AECOM is a lot different than Foothills in terms of how many positions there are as you move up the food chain. And so you kind of have to create leadership and management opportunities at some point. You kind of might reach the top of the food chain at 15 years of experience, but still the person with 25 or 30 years of experience is still growing and advancing in their career. It's just that they have to do it on their own. They have to find ways to expand their leadership within the company. So, it's interesting. I think Carla said something, when I started my career in construction, I remember looking at people that were 10, 15, and 20 years beyond me and saying, who do I want to be like? Whose job do I like? Whose personality do I like? And how many of those people are there? And that was important to me. And ultimately, I couldn't find a perfect match in terms of geographic requirements and everything else. And I was still interested in the engineering side. So I left and went to a small consulting firm. But I think that's a helpful tool, is just to look ahead of you and say, and then talk to that person and say, what did your career look like? And you just start asking around, and it's amazing how unique everybody's career path is. So often we're saying, man, I know of somebody that was a project manager at 35. Well, how many do you know that didn't become that until they were 50 or whatever that and their story just looked a lot different. I think we have to be open to a lot of different paths to get to, maybe, and I say it's the same place, maybe it's the same title, but you are a different type of project engineer, project manager because of the experience you've had. So, focus less on what the end goal is maybe, and taking a path that just fits your personality and just embracing that experience and that knowledge. So that's what I would say.
Absolutely. Anthony, what about you? Like, how would you advise someone that, asked you about how to express their projected career timeline?
Yeah, I think it's a good question by Chad. I mean, I think a lot of civil engineers maybe aren't as forward about it as they should be, in my opinion. Like, if you want to get to a certain level in your company, you should ask about it. You should talk to your manager, talk to your supervisor and say, hey, listen, I really want to get to this position. What do I need to do to get there? What are the expectations? What skills can I work on? That's what I did. I mean, I wanted to get to a certain level in the consulting firm when I was practicing as a civil engineer every day. And I just asked them, like, I've been doing this stuff. Like, what else do I need to do? And they were like, hey, you got to work on these skills. You got to do this better. And I just kept working at that. And then I would go back to them again. Hey, I did all this stuff. Like, how am I looking? And eventually I got to that position. And, I wasn't shy about just asking for what you wanted. So I think that's important, because I do think that a lot of companies, some companies have clearer career pathways than others, right? And I think that when it's not that clear, it can be a bit challenging and a bit frustrating. The one thing that I try to tell civil engineers and civil engineering like firm leaders is like if you're asking someone to work, but they don't see the path ahead, it's almost like they're rowing a canoe like into the fog, right? Like I can sit here and like go like this and go like this, but like if I don't know where I'm going, like I'm probably not going to go that fast, quite frankly, right? So I do think it's good from the leadership side to have those clear pathways, and from someone who's like an individual contributor or a design engineer to ask about it. You know, like what are my options here? Is there a project management path, or like how do I get on that path? What do I need to do? So I think the more vocal and the more conversations you can have about it, the more kind of intel you can get, if you will, so that you know what steps are the right steps for you to take.
No, that's great advice. So I'll move on to the next question. If you just transition design to management, what are some things you would make sure you do in your first 3 months as a manager? Carla, can I ask you first? What are the first top things you do?
Absolutely. Well, because that transition or the timing of it usually isn't like, okay, yesterday you were an individual contributor designing and stamping and sealing things, and today you're now a project manager. There is, I would say, for almost all people, this kind of fuzzy gray area where you're still designing, you're still contributing to stuff individually. And even as you continue on as a manager, you might still contribute, technical expertise, things like that. But there is a transition there. And I am not that far time-wise from becoming a manager. I think it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago that I really kind of, fully dove into that, kind of learning how to say no to stuff you can't do anymore, honestly. I remember when I switched from my big, CAD, super powered laptop to what I like to call my itty bitty manager committee laptop that can't even open a DWG. I resisted that for a while. I resisted switching, tools and materials and kind of my daily protocols of what my day looked like, because I was so used to and so comfortable in that contributor role. So part of that had to be like, hey, I can't do that anymore. I've said yes to this thing. I've got to say no to these other things I was doing previously. Just kind of setting expectations, for yourself, for your teams, the people that have been managing you, the teams you've been working on. That was, it's an ongoing thing. You can't just do one day. So all right, I'm not doing that anymore. Bye. But kind of, thinking about that and thinking about what you have to offload a little bit now that you become a manager. I would also say too, just like we've said on the answers to other questions, start talking to people, ask around, be a fly on the wall, listen. If you are starting to manage a project or starting to manage people and you have some great vision you want to execute, go ahead and do that. That's great. Wonderful. Kudos to you. But also know that you're new to this and you have so much to learn. You will have so much to learn for years and years to come. So absorb everything you can, all the information you can get from your peers, people that you see doing a job that you think they're awesome at it, and also knowing when you don't know the answer to things and saying okay, I need to call in my experts and call in somebody else to really help me out here, and not always acting like the expert, because none of us are. Yeah, that would be my suggestion. I don't know, Reuben, was that similar for you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what you said, what resonated with me in my mind was like the less is more mentality. When you first start out, I think you said something like you have to push off things that maybe you can't say yes to everything, but just try to figure out how to do the basic things well and try to learn those things. Ask for help. Those first couple months, you should be having a senior manager say, I need to be in your office 15 minutes every Monday. I just want to run a couple things past you to build that confidence. And what's the statement that a frog never jumps out of a boiling pot? If it, whatever the thing is, you don't become a senior project manager instantly. It grows on you. You start with one project and then eventually you're going to have to manage 8 or 10 projects. But so I just think less is more. You start just trying to master a finite number of things. You're getting exposure to some new stuff. Don't feel like you have to do everything. Don't compare yourself against someone who's had, a ton of experience, but have those people in your world at least once a week for that first period. So you can ask them, walk through what you think is the right way to prioritize. I think that's super helpful. Don't try and get to that point immediately to be able to be like those people that you're aspiring to be.
That's great advice. Anthony, do you have anything to add? Do you have courses on the top things you should do in your first 3 months?
I mean, I think Edward's question is a great question to ask. Like, if you become a manager, I would ask other managers, like, what are a couple things I should do right off the bat? Like kind of similar to what Reuben and Carla said, like, ask other people, especially if you could find people that are more recently become managers, because it's probably fresh for them. Like, they probably just went through some stuff. So I think that that's a really good question to ask. And, I think it just goes back to what I talked about earlier, like continuously working on your people skills and your ability to interact with people will be critical. And I think also, like, not just getting advice from mentors, but also, talking to the people that you're going to be managing and understanding their goals and their needs and how you can help them as a manager. I think that's really important. I had a tricky situation when I became a manager as a consulting civil engineer, was that I had to manage someone who was a lot older than me, and he wasn't that happy about that. So it was a bit of a tricky situation to start my management career. But, I just had to kind of believe in my own abilities, and that the fact that I got promoted to that position was because, they saw some ability in me, and I had to kind of navigate it and talk to some different people. So I do think that there's going to be some challenging situations. And I think, to Carla and Reuben's point, you're not going to be able to master them overnight. It's like, what Luke Skywalker didn't become like a Jedi instantly. He had to like figure out how to control the Force. It's kind of like something like that. But I do think the people around you and the people through ASCE as well can be great resources for you. And you just need to keep asking people different questions and then kind of figure out what like your leadership style is going to be, quite frankly. I mean, that's the one thing about leadership that I kind of like. Like in civil engineering, we have certain equations we get to use all the time. We plug in the numbers, but it doesn't quite work that way in leadership. Like, everyone's different, people are different, projects are different. So you kind of have to feel your own way out. And I think the more people you can talk to, both senior people and also people that you're going to be interacting with and managing and leading, it can give you that 360 kind of perspective that can really help you.
It's really good advice. So I'll move on to our next question. Edward's given the clap, so thank you guys for great perspective and answers there. So to each three panelists, what was one of the biggest challenges for you transitioning from a technical engineer to position to a manager? I know, Anthony, you just mentioned working with somebody, managing someone older, obviously I think would be challenging. Carla, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I have a number of stories like that as well. And not just managing, folks who are more senior, but interacting with folks who are more senior. We had I think he was our landscape architect on a project, and he's, a professor emeritus and like just the, very seasoned professional. And I had to tell him like, hey, the client told us we need to remove this tree from the plans. And he like literally blew up at me and hung up on me. And I was like, I'm just trying to tell you what the client told us to do. And I had to find allies. And I see another question in the chat popped up about, being a woman in the industry. And we throw around the terms like allyship and marginalized communities and that sort of stuff a lot, because it is a problem that we need to work on as a society as a whole, and also as an industry. But finding those people who are going to stick their neck out for you or go to bat for you. You might have to talk to them first and say, this is the situation I'm in, or this is what I'm dealing with. Here's how I'm thinking of proceeding. What do you think? What would you do? I would write emails to my manager on the first project that I managed and say, how does this sound? And just kind of get it, clear with him. And he would, delete a lot of stuff and tell me to pare it down a little bit and be, very concise and just very brief and get to the point of things. And kind of dealing with those difficult people, that can be tough, especially when you're new. You're probably pretty young. You might not be young, but you're new to the landscape. And yeah, really just trying to work with folks. Reuben, you said something earlier about when you're working with people in ASCE, they're not paid to be there. They're just there to volunteer because they want to be. I will say that ASCE absolutely helps with that. Even if you are working with somebody on a project in your company, a stakeholder, whatever, and they do have an interest, financial or otherwise, you still have to find a way through interpersonal skills to, get everybody on the same page, convince them potentially of something, and just trying to, might have to fake it till you make it a little bit. I've been saying lately, I'm 35, and I've been saying lately that I finally kind of feel like people just assume that I have expertise because of my title and they just listen to me, as opposed to, 10 years ago where it was like, okay, this other person speaks for me. They say, now you're going to listen to Carla, and sort of having this, allyship needed to really get people to listen to me.
No, I mean, that's awesome to hear that that's something that, you feel like you've established yourself where you can speak for yourself and you have that expertise on your own. So that's awesome. Reuben, do you want to talk about some challenges maybe that you've encountered when you transitioned into project management?
Yeah. I think the biggest piece is that you, and Carla alluded to it, you become the answer person. There's no one else to turn to say, okay, this is just my opinion. Now someone else has to give an answer. And sometimes I'll talk to students at the local university and I say, it's awesome that you're getting an engineering degree. You are going to come out of here and become a great problem solver. And that's what engineers do. That's what their degree means. But I said, very few of you will become leaders, and because not all of you can be good decision makers. You can't come, it's just hard. Engineers want to keep getting more data. They want to keep getting more information, and they don't know when to stop. At some point, you have to stop and say, I'm going to make a decision. And in my industry, and probably in a lot of our industries, our clients kind of expect that, sometimes almost instantaneously. So to know when you can give an answer off the cuff on the phone, and when you say, you know what, I'm going to have to take that back to the office and I'm going to need to spend some time with that. That's, again, is a decision that needs to be made by that manager. So I think those are just a couple of illustrations of what is the challenge? The challenge is forcing yourself to have to make a decision, and no longer can you just present information to someone else to make the decision. You have to do that. And in some cases, you have to say, sorry, I still can't make a decision. We need to do it as a group, whether it be with your client, whether it be reaching out to someone else in your team. So yeah, I would just say that's a huge piece of being a manager. You're no longer a data cruncher. You're no longer just producing, specific technical deliverables. You are now making decisions.
Absolutely. Anthony, what do you have to add?
So I guess what I would add, and it kind of follows up on Reuben's thoughts there, and I think this is a good term. I think it's the name of a book, but it works well here, is, what got you here won't get you there, right? It's like, that's like the biggest thing from going from engineer to manager. Like, with the skills that took you to get to a manager as an engineer are not the skills that are going to take to be a great manager, right? Because it's really like the technical skills got you there for the most part. And it's these other skills that are going to get you to the next level. It's like, there's another really good business book, The E-Myth Revisited, where there's like the general idea is like, someone's really good at making apple pies, so they start a business selling apple pies. The problem is they weren't good at a business selling apple pies. They were just good at making the pie. So it's like, that's what happens with engineers, is that we're really good at engineering, and the company's like, hey, you're doing really well, we're going to promote you to manager. Well, I don't even know what that is or how to do it. So I think that's really the biggest challenge, is like figuring out the new skill sets you need. And I think the other biggest challenge, I know for a lot of technical professionals, is letting go of some of the technical work, right? Because we like it, we're good at it, that's what we were taught. And now we kind of have to give some of it up, kind of like Carla was saying, which is probably actually a good strategy. Get a laptop where you can't actually physically do the work, because it's very hard.
Sometimes it's the only thing stopping me.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, I've done sessions just on delegation for technical professionals because it's such a hard process to like let go and then to be able to delegate effectively. And if you're going to be a leader, that's really what you have to do. So I just really think keeping in mind that, the skills that it took to get you to the managerial level are not the same skills that you're now going to have to build to be a great manager and a great leader, and identifying those skills. And we've talked about a lot of them today already, but certainly talking to others and understanding those key leadership skills so that you can start to build them and develop them, because it's a whole new toolbox of skills you're going to need now.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about as far as the different toolbox. Starting with the project, two questions now. Is starting with the project coordinator recommended as the first step for this transition? So I guess that would mean that you would be moving into the role as the project coordinator. Is that how we're reading this?
Yeah, I think it sounds to me like, from what I've seen, like they're saying like when you go from a technical engineer or technical designer, like what would be the first step to management? Like a project coordinator. Like I've seen companies have like a task manager, which becomes like a project coordinator or a project manager. But I think it's a very variable thing in the industry. Like it depends on the company, depends on what they call it, depends on how big the company is. So I don't know. I mean, I'm going to work in a consulting firm, probably. Maybe Carla or Reuben could answer this, but I would probably say it's highly variable between firms, what they call it, essentially.
Yeah, in terms of, the title itself, I've seen it called all sorts of things. I honestly, and maybe it doesn't look as good on my resume, but I honestly have just taken on whatever that looks like. And sometimes that means coming in, especially on a really big project, and just being, kind of the right-hand person to the chief engineer or the program manager or the project manager, whoever that person is. They have a million fires to put out all day, every day. They all do, no matter what project or what company they work for. And you can help make their life easier. And by doing that work, whether that's taking notes for their meeting, which can seem, again, a bit silly and just like help chase those things down, you can help interface with people and start kind of, getting in there a little bit occasionally and helping them to manage their things that they're dealing with. You'll probably learn a lot from that person too by helping them put out those fires. So even taking little smaller pieces, if it's not a whole project, maybe not a whole discipline, maybe not a whole task, but just take, one thing that needs to get done, whether it's a kickoff for a PowerPoint presentation for the project start, even something little like that to say, I'm going to do that. That's on me. I'm going to do it start to finish. I'm going to collaborate with all the people that I need to get the contributions in there. That is managing. That's leadership. And that can be a great way not only to work on those skills, it's fantastic networking. Somebody's going to love that you're helping make their life easier. And you get to learn a lot more about the project too. You don't just get dumped on a project where they're like, you're the manager now, and you like suddenly have to overnight read how many thousands of pages of contract documents and project requirements. It's sort of a good way to, again, just be a fly on the wall as the project progresses. You can help out in whatever little bits you have capacity and ability for, but just kind of sneak in there and do your job assisting with the work. I do think project coordinator, that would be a good title to assign to that. I've very often worked on projects where I don't really have a title, or we have to kind of make one up. But, everybody I talk to says, oh my God, Carla, you're so invaluable. We couldn't have done this without you. And it's like, well, what did I even do? I don't even know what to call this on my resume or my project resume, but get in there and help however you can. And that's how you get started.
So Reuben, do you have anything to add?
No, not really. I mean, the project coordinator piece, that's more of a non-technical position in our office. So, but I think, something Carla said is, just kind of embracing different management opportunities, whatever your level is, as a starting engineer, and advancing 5 and 10 years beyond that, there are definitely management opportunities. So maybe it looks a little like that project coordinator. It's assisting somebody. Sometimes, we talked earlier about, we'll talk to your manager, tell them this is what you want. And I would say, don't just tell them, show them. Like if you come into that same meeting and say, this is what I've done, I've seen, I've talked to, I've asked, and now I'm filling in those gaps, it makes that conversation a lot more clear. So anyway, I think there's opportunities all over the place, whatever your title may be, to show that you're gaining experience in management.
And I think a good addition to that too is, sometimes you might step on toes or you might skin your knees a little bit and say, you walk into a meeting or somebody invites you into a meeting and you say, I'll take notes or I'll follow up on that. And they might go, no, we don't really need you to do that. They might turn you down, and that's okay. It's okay to get no for an answer. You're going to hear it a bajillion more times in your career. So just get used to it now. But keep offering, keep stepping up, keep, raising your hand, saying yes to stuff. And, at the end of the day, you will have slowly built up that, initiative that you're taking, and you will find yourself in, that bigger, better role someday, but you got to start small.
Absolutely. So we're kind of running out of time here, but we do have a recommendation for a good book on nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg, for conflict resolution. Sorry. Thank you, Edward, for sharing that. And then another question about books in the chat that kind of follows up on that. Anthony, do you have certain books on management skills that you would recommend?
I have a million books in my office, but I'm just responding in the chat too with a couple. But
Okay, awesome.
we also have a list of recommended reading on our website, and we tried to split it by skill sets. So I'll share that in the chat. So like if you're looking for communication skills, you can go to this tab, and there's just a list of books and stuff. I don't know. I mean, I come back to a few that I put in the chat. I mean, I like Living the 80-20 Way by Richard Koch, which is helps you prioritize your tasks effectively. Engineers, we get really bad at prioritizing. We just like to build a list and check it off in order. But the problem is the order of the list is probably not the order of importance. So like the 80-20 rule helps you to like more prioritize things by effort versus impact, as opposed to like urgency versus importance. Like it's two different concepts, right? I like Cal Newport a lot. He wrote the book Deep Work, which you may have heard of, which is like super popular, which is like his basic philosophy is like we live in a world now where it's become very difficult to do deep work. And I think as civil engineers, we need to do deep work. Like we need hours at a time to like review things and do design work. And it's really hard to do that with all these distractions. So I just read his recent book. Actually, I have it right here. It's called The World Without Email by Cal Newport, which is also really good, which is, again, like now we have like Teams and Slack and all these like asynchronous messages. So like we can't really focus that long, and it makes it harder for us to do like design work and stuff. So I think that a couple of just books that I've read recently, but, you know, I think that the recommended reading page has a lot of good stuff there. I mean, I could go on and on about books.
That's awesome. And people can connect with you, right, Anthony, on LinkedIn if they want to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I put a lot of content on LinkedIn, our podcasts and everything. And, you know, always looking for more people to interview. We have like 10 different podcasts now, geotech, structural, civil, et cetera.
That's awesome. So I think this is probably the last question we have time for. Would you agree that emotional intelligence / training and teaching is lacking in the industry for engineers in general and more specifically for managers or to managers? Reuben's laughing. I'll let you go first.
Well, I was the biggest critic of managers until I became one. And then I realized how hard it actually is. It's just so challenging to balance all the different things that are required. You know, the urgency of what the client is expecting, the demand of what the business is expecting in terms of, you know, production and making sure that we can make money and put together an engineering plan that ethically, you know, meets standards. And then to take into consideration, you know, an employee that has 2, 5, 10, and 12 years of experience and has issues at home and there's just so many things there. So I hear you. Yes, emotional intelligence is challenging, but I think it's just challenging across the board. And engineers are no worse than anybody else. It's just hard. And there's a reason that sometimes people are grumpy because the challenges are there. And I think, you know, to me, communication and trying to teach managers to be able to stop and listen and hear, but then encourage the subordinates, if I can call them that, but the team members, the other people to say, wow, you bring a different perspective than we need to have a conversation and let's figure out how we can do this together. So yes, I agree, but there's a huge asterisk that I think there's just a lot of, you know, everybody is responsible for the success of the team. And I feel very strongly about that. So when we have that discussion, that roundtable, I'll participate in that one as well.
That I might have to schedule that one for the new year. That's a whole nother topic that we can discuss. Awesome. Well, we're running out of time. I will say let's do a quick wrap up. If I could ask each of you to share kind of your summary of today's conversation in like 30 seconds or less. Carla, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I'll start. I guess my main takeaway for folks is, you know, it's up to you. Not to say that there aren't industry resources or your company can help you become whatever kind of leader or manager you want to be, but you are unique. There is nobody like you, and you are going to become whatever leader you are most likely to become. So focus on that, focus on your strengths, you know, remember who you are, learn more about who you are, become the best version of yourself over time, and you'll get there eventually.
Awesome. And I love the book recommendations in the chat. So everybody check those out. I'll just go in order across my screen. Anthony, can I ask you next to give your little summary?
Yeah, sure. I would say, like we talked about, build your people skills, build your public speaking skills. I think those are some of those skills that you're going to need to get you for you to become a great manager, a great leader that, you may not have developed to be a great technical engineer or technical professional. And by building those, you really expand your abilities and really build your confidence, meaning getting involved with ASCE, getting out there whenever you can, speaking. I think you can learn all the skills in the world, but if you don't have confidence to go out and use them, it's not going to be helpful for you. Awesome.
Great advice. Reuben, I'll let you wrap us up here.
Yeah, my thought is to don't rush. Don't feel like it's an immediate obligation. I just hear a lot of people saying, my peers are project managers, or I can see that so-and-so. Every job is different. Every person is different. You'll know when you're ready, and just don't feel like it's an obligation to meet that standard at a certain point of your career. The career is long, and you don't want to run out of steam. And the worst thing you can do is do this when you're not ready. It just adds stress. And you need to have a certain maturity level, not based on age, but based on what your comfort level is. And so just would encourage you to evaluate that and use your resources around you to evaluate that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, everyone, for this great conversation. I do want to remind everyone that you can continue the conversation. ASC members can continue the conversation on ASC Collaborate. I just put the link in the chat. We also have virtual events that ASC offers. I'll put the link in the chat to that if you want to check out other virtual events. And then if you're not an ASC member, I'm happy to talk with you about the benefits and resources that ASC provides for members. So again, thank you again to this absolutely fantastic panel. It's been a great conversation, and hopefully we can continue the discussion in 2024.
Yeah,
all right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for the
Yep.
question.
And I'll share the recording out. And yeah, thanks again. Happy holidays, everyone.
Take care. Happy holidays.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
think so.
A big thanks to ASCE for allowing us to share this panel discussion on our channel here. I hope you liked it. We plan to continue to put out videos like this to help engineers become better managers and leaders. Please subscribe to our channel here so you don't miss out on some tips that can really change the game for you in your career. And I hope to see you next week.